Welcome back. I'm playing Warhammer 40,000 Battlesector, and we'll get started on our last video for the Chaos Demons of Khorne on the multiplayer unit tips and recommendations for every faction and unit in this game. We are going to discuss the momentum and command points on this video here. So the Chaos Demons of Khorne, they have the Blood for the Blood God faction trait. So what that does is it gives you plus 25% momentum gains when you're killing organic units. And for every momentum that you gain, so it goes as a percentage bar, as I'm sure you're aware by now, all the way up to 100, you get 1% damage for each momentum. So if you get 100%, meaning a full momentum, that means you'd be getting 100% damage to your forces. Now, unfortunately, you see that this is purely organic units that they get the momentum gains with. So that means these guys really struggle at getting momentum against non-organic units. So that includes any vehicles that they're killing, or if you're fighting Necrons, because just as that nullifies the Fleshhound's ability to do charge attacks against them, it also means that you're getting plus 25% less momentum generally for every kill that you're doing. Likewise, if you're fighting, say, the Orcs, which have almost all organic units other than their, bikes, death dreads, helicopters, or you're playing against the Sisters, assuming they're not using the transports, you can easily gain momentum even faster, especially when you're using the Bloodthirsters to get plus 40% momentum gains, assuming you're within their range for the greater demon buffs. So, assuming you have both, you're getting 40% plus another 25, which would bring you up to 65% momentum gains when you're killing organic units. So that's how you can quickly get these guys to get crazy amounts of command points, or if you're sacrificing your units and getting them killed. And then you're also getting some minor points when you're capturing objectives. Things like that is typically how it's displayed, but that's how your faction trait would work here. So I'll get a match going and I'll show all three of the command abilities for each level and kind of describe what they do. If you've been watching my videos here, you would have seen me use at least the tier 1 ability, which is one I really like to use on most factions other than the Tyranids, because they can rapidly overcome the ability, and I'll describe that more in detail when I show what each one does and kind of explain my thoughts on them. Okay, and then in terms of their command points, obviously just like every other faction, the command points are earned when the Army's HQ unit by the Army's HQ command unit whenever a friendly unit gains momentum, is killed, or completes an objective. So they have 3 tiers, just like every other faction. The first one is Aura of Terror, and the HQ commander uses Influence of the Warp to reduce the foes to a state of utter panic, frozen, and less able to move or wield weaponry. Gives minus 25% accuracy in all units that it debuffs. Get minus 1 movement, and that lasts for 3 turns. So this is excellent for taking out guys like the Necrons or the Sisters if they're doing infantry or range-based military. Even affects melee units because it's a pure accuracy debuff. And so as you can see here, it has a pretty decent range. It is a, how many squares by how many squares would it be? Looks like a 5x5, and it's got pretty decent range. It goes from the HQ unit, so if you brought them over here, to move them up one, bring them up here, you just plop her down, and it would affect everything that would be in that range there. And so you can see it just sticks on there for 25 accuracy and minus 1 movement, and it tells you with a little 3 how long it's going to last there. So it definitely can be very good, and I usually like to spam that around the battlefield. The second ability is Echoes of the Endless Fury. Khorne and his savage minions imbue white-hot anger and endless fury. Brutal waves of apoplexy resonate from the HQ commander, draining the will to fight from the Legion's foes. It removes all Overwatch stacks and causes momentum damage. And this one too is a 5x5. Has pretty decent range, but for the most part I never use this ability. because I don't find that the guys are typically that blobbed up. Now, if you're fighting, say, Necrons or something, and they're getting massive heals, maybe you would want to use this, and then you just kind of right-click, and that's what the ability is there. And those 3 arrows would be the momentum damage that would be suffered. But typically, when it comes to this, I'm either wanting to spam the Aura of Terror a lot more, or I'm going to want to save up for the Blood Tithe, which is channeling the boundless font of anger and rage that emanates from the Lord of Skulls. The HQ commander unleashes a psychic attack from the warp that inflicts 22 to 30 psychic damage across a wide area. And then this just does a large area as well, and it's 5 by 5. And it just shows kind of the range that it can go here. And, you know, it seems like, oh, it's kind of weak, and it is a little bit. But the big thing is, since it's psychic damage, there's not really a lot of reduction for it. Just gets armor piercing, and it doesn't really get reduced depending on the armor. And if you're saying playing the you know, forces playing against the Tyranids, now this would be strong enough to practically kill every model of a low tier unit that's globbed together. And then it just kind of does something like that and does the damage. So you can see it did pretty much full damage, even though these guys have 5 armor. So that's how it works. I mean, it's definitely not game changing. So unless you're fighting, you know, a swarm tactic against Tyranids, I typically just spam the very first ability there to blind everybody and get the accuracy debuffs, because I find that to be much more efficient. Again, I don't really find the Overwatch to make a lot of sense unless for some reason they're hiding in a corner making your forces go after them. If you can somehow sneak up with your commander unit and then take away all their Overwatch, I guess in that situation it could be beneficial. But typically if somebody's hiding in the corner making you get to them anyways, you're not going to have gained as much 2 command points to be able to get there. So definitely the accuracy tends to be the command point of ability that I use most frequently, and I find that it helps me the most. Like I said, it's not great against the Tyranids, especially if they're using swarm tactics, because if they have the synaptic leader and their other accuracy buffs, then they can just totally overwhelm. Like minus 20 accuracy, 25 accuracy to them means nothing, because they are synapsing for so much significant accuracy buffs anyways. They're going to, even with the penalty, they're going to likely get over 100% accuracy to begin with. But for every other faction, it will affect, and again, because it's a pure accuracy, it affects both melee and ranged, and it affects their movement, so then they can't get away from you as you're trying to close the distance to get them into melee combat with all of your forces here, given such little forces of yours have the ability to have a ranged attack. So I hope that gives you a better understanding of how the Forces of Chaos command points work, what each one of the abilities does, how it sticks around, and how they end up gaining the abilities, because it definitely is unique in that they only get the bonus momentum from the organic unit. So if you're finding like, God, some factions, this seems like I'm getting momentum all the time, and other ones I'm not, that's what the rate limiting step is. And again, if it seems like, God, the Forces of Chaos are not doing a lot of damage by the end of but by the end of the game they're doing tons, it's because they're likely stacking buffs, stacking momentum damage, and getting their synapses with the Chaos Tides together and stacking those critical hit chances, because all those things together allow them just to clear the field, especially if they're just mindlessly throwing forces at you, because as long as their summoning units are alive, they can keep sacrificing things and summoning guys every 3 turns as needed, and they can summon other Blood Masters, which means they get even more summons on that. So that's how things can rapidly spiral out of control when you're fighting the Forces of Chaos. So you'll want to snipe down their HQ units to stop all the buffs and all the summoning of additional units, because it can be an absolute nightmare. And while you're trying to do that, you need to snipe down the Bloodthirsters so it stops the momentum gains and stops them from nuking all of your medium tier units or high tier units, especially if they get rear attacks on you. So thanks for watching. I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you are, please give my channel a like and subscribe. Encourage me to post more content for you. Have a great day.